The last time humans sent Nathan Hale into a negotiation, three-star empires surrendered before he even spoke. The words moved through the docking bay like cold air through a graveyard. Admiral Vader's four-fingered hand trembled around his silver cane as the massive diplomatic cruiser settled against the magnetic clamps with a deep metallic groan. Steam hissed beneath the landing platform. Blue warning lights reflected across polished black floors. Around him, senators, officers, and royal attendants stood in perfect ceremonial formation beneath the vaulted glass ceiling of Valari Station 9. Then the boarding ramp lowered. Princess Lasara Vale stepped forward first, tall and elegant beneath flowing white ceremonial fabric trimmed with silver light thread. Her turquoise skin seemed almost luminous beneath the station lights, and the violet gemstones woven into her silver hair marked her status instantly. Royal blood. Untouchable. Every officer bowed as she passed. Every camera followed her. But the admiral wasn't looking at the princess. His pale eyes locked onto the human walking several steps behind her, carrying a simple black data case. The man looked ordinary at first glance. White male. Late 30s. Broad shoulders hidden beneath a dark diplomatic coat. Faint scars near the jawline. Short, dirty blonde hair touched with gray near the temples. Calm blue eyes that never stayed in one place too long. He moved without urgency, without tension, like a man who had already survived every possible disaster life could invent. Nathan Hale, officially listed as diplomatic support staff from Earth Coalition Command. Lasara barely acknowledged him as she continued toward the reception corridor. "You're walking too close again," she said without turning around. Her voice was smooth and cold. Royal aides remained 3 steps behind. Nathan adjusted his pace immediately. "Yes, princess." No irritation. No pride. Just quiet obedience. Lasara found that strangely annoying. She had expected confidence from humans. The galaxy constantly described them as loud, emotional, reckless creatures from a dangerous death world. But Nathan Hale behaved more like furniture then. A person. Silent. Controlled. Almost invisible. The station orchestra began playing as the diplomatic escort approached. Alien nobles lined both sides of the corridor in glowing formal attire. Reporters floated nearby on anti-grav platforms whispering excited commentary into cameras. Yet Admiral Vader still couldn't breathe properly. Because 22 years earlier, during the Titan border collapse, he had seen another human officer walk through smoke exactly like that. Calm. Silent. Carrying a black tactical case. "Impossible," the Admiral whispered under his breath. One of his younger officers glanced toward him. "Sir." Vader ignored the question. His pulse hammered painfully against his ribs. He remembered the old war broadcasts. Earth ships burning through frozen orbit. Entire fleets retreating without orders. And one name repeated over every emergency frequency in the sector. Nathan Hale. The ghost of Titan. The last warlord. The human who ended wars so quickly the galaxy never learned how he did it. Suddenly Lasara stopped walking. She frowned down at the polished floor near the entrance staircase. One of the silver clasps on her ceremonial heel had snapped loose. Irritation flashed across her face immediately as dozens of cameras drifted closer. "Wonderful timing," she muttered quietly. Before any servant could react, Nathan stepped forward and knelt beside her without a word. The entire corridor fell silent. He adjusted the damaged clasp carefully with steady hands while nobles and military officers stared in disbelief. Not because a human aide was fixing royal footwear, but because the most feared military strategist in modern galactic history was kneeling calmly beneath fluorescent station lights, carrying a princess's shoe, like it was the most ordinary thing in the universe. Admiral Vader felt genuine fear crawl down his spine for the first time in 2 decades. Because men like Nathan Hale did not disappear. They only went quiet. The royal transport drifted through the upper traffic lanes of Valari Station 9 like a shard of white crystal floating across midnight water. Beneath the glass roads of the city sector, thousands of civilian ships moved in glowing streams of blue and gold light, while advertisements flickered across skyscrapers nearly half a mile tall. Princess Lasara barely looked out the window. She sat upright inside the transport cabin reviewing diplomatic schedules projected in pale holographic lines across her lap. Trade negotiations, military treaties, border disputes. Endless meetings with people pretending to smile. Across from her, Nathan Hale remained silent beside the door with both hands folded behind his back. Motionless again. Always motionless. Lasara finally closed the projection with visible annoyance. Do all human aides behave like security drones? Nathan glanced toward her calmly. I'm not sure, Princess. That was humor. I know. His answer came flat and steady. Somehow that irritated her even more. Outside the transport, rain streaked across the glass highways of the station in silver lines. The storm systems around the orbital ring had intensified during docking. Thunder rolled faintly through the city structure beneath them. Lasara leaned back against the seat and studied him openly now. Up close, the human looked older than she first assumed. Not physically old. Worn. Like someone who had spent too many years carrying weight nobody else could see. There were tiny white scars near his wrists. Faint burns near his collarbone. Even his posture felt strange. Not stiff like military discipline. Balanced. Controlled. As though every movement had already been calculated 3 steps ahead. You were military once, she said suddenly. Nathan did not react immediately. A long time ago. What rank? It does not matter anymore. Lasara crossed her arms slowly. You avoid questions professionally. Occupational habit. The transport curved around the upper district towers, and for a brief moment the city lights illuminated Nathan's face clearly through the rain-streaked windows. His blue eyes reflected the storm outside without emotion. No pride. No fear. No ambition. Lasara found that unsettling. Most beings wanted something around royalty. Influence. Wealth. Attention. Nathan Hale wanted absolutely nothing. The transport suddenly slowed as traffic control redirected civilian lanes ahead. Through the front glass canopy, emergency lights flashed amber across a crowded lower platform. Civilians gathered behind security barriers while station officers rushed through the rain. Accident? Lasara asked. The pilot nodded nervously. A freight tram malfunction, Your Highness. Nathan's attention shifted instantly toward the scene below. Not dramatic. Not obvious. But Lasara noticed the change immediately. The human became completely still. Focused. Like a predator hearing distant movement in tall grass. Then she saw it too. A small alien child standing alone near the edge of the restricted platform, while officers shouted conflicting orders through static-filled comms. The little girl could not have been older than 6. Her glowing yellow rain hood blinked weakly beneath the storm lights. Nobody reached her because incoming cargo traffic still crossed the emergency lane. Nathan moved before anyone spoke. Nathan, Lasara started sharply, but the cabin door was already opening. Cold rain exploded into the transport interior as he stepped onto the platform below. Security officers turned immediately. One recognized him from the diplomatic escort and began protesting regulations. Nathan ignored him completely. He crossed the flooded lane with calm, measured steps while automated warning sirens echoed through the station. The child looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. Nathan simply removed his black diplomatic coat and wrapped it gently around her shoulders before kneeling to adjust the blinking hood strap beneath her chin. The little girl stopped crying almost instantly. Through sheets of silver rain, Lasara watched the child grab Nathan's hand without hesitation, without fear, and somehow that disturbed her more than Admiral Vader's terrified expression earlier that morning. Because children always sense dangerous people first. But this child looked at Nathan Hale like she had just found the safest person in the galaxy. The storm finally eased 3 hours later, but the station still smelled like rain and overheated circuitry. Thin layers of fog drifted through the lower transit decks, while maintenance drones floated silently near the ceiling, replacing damaged light panels one by one. Princess Lasara stood inside the royal observation chamber overlooking the city sector below, arms folded tightly as holographic reports scrolled beside her in pale blue columns. Civilian casualties, 0. Structural damage, minimal. Transport delays, severe. Her advisors continued discussing logistics behind her, but she barely listened. Because her attention kept drifting toward the human standing quietly near the chamber entrance. Nathan had changed into a fresh black uniform after returning from the storm, though faint rain stains still darkened the cuffs of his sleeves. He remained completely expressionless while technicians and diplomats rushed around the room in controlled panic. The child from the platform incident had apparently refused medical transport until Nathan personally walked her to emergency services. One of the station nurses had later described the little girl as unusually calm around him. Lasara still could not understand that part. "Your Highness." A soft mechanical tone interrupted her thoughts. One of the station attendants approached carefully carrying a silver data tablet. "Priority transmission from Valari Security Command." Lasara accepted it immediately. The holographic file expanded above her palm with official clearance sigils rotating slowly through the air. Her expression tightened within seconds. "Restricted Personnel Archive. Subject designation, Nathan Hale." Large sections were blacked out. Entire decades removed. Mission records erased under military authority codes older than most modern governments. Even the remaining fragments felt wrong somehow. Titan border conflict. Lunar siege resolution. Evacuation command protocol. Casualty estimates classified. Psychological evaluation unavailable. One sentence near the bottom froze her attention completely. Clearance level reserved for extinction tier wartime authority. Lasara frowned softly. What does that even mean? Nathan's calm voice answered from behind her. "It means the file should not be open." She turned sharply. The room seemed quieter suddenly. Advisors stopped speaking. Even the station attendants lowered their eyes. Nathan stepped closer without urgency, but several alien officers unconsciously shifted backward anyway. Lasara noticed that immediately. Fear. Genuine fear. She looked back at the glowing file in her hand. "Why are your military records sealed under extinction authority?" Nathan remained silent for a moment. Outside the observation glass, lightning flashed faintly beyond the orbital shields, illuminating his face in pale white light. "Old wars create old precautions," he said quietly. "That is not an answer. It is the only one I can give." Lasara studied him carefully now. The human did not look dangerous. Not in the obvious ways. No raised voice. No aggression. No visible ego. But she suddenly understood why every officer around him behaved differently. Nathan Hale carried silence the way soldiers carried weapons. Heavy. Controlled. Permanent. The princess lowered the data tablet slowly. "Were you really a warlord?" Several people in the chamber stopped breathing. Nathan's eyes shifted toward the city lights beyond the glass. For the first time since arriving on the station, something moved behind his expression. Not pride. Regret. "That word was invented by reporters," he said softly. "I was just a soldier who stayed alive longer than most." The answer should have sounded humble. Instead, it felt colder somehow. Lasara glanced again at the classified file hovering in the air between them. Entire governments had hidden this man's history. Entire military sectors reacted to his name with fear. Yet earlier that same day, she had watched him kneel in the rain to comfort a frightened child. Nothing about Nathan Hale fit together correctly. Then the chamber lights flickered once. A brief pulse. Tiny. Barely noticeable. But Nathan's head lifted instantly toward the ceiling. His eyes narrowed almost invisibly. "That was not station turbulence," he said quietly. Across the observation room, several officers checked their consoles in confusion. 1 second later, every emergency light in the chamber shifted from soft blue to flashing crimson. And somewhere deep beneath the station, an alarm began to howl. The crimson emergency. Lights painted the observation chamber in waves of pulsing red. Outside the glass walls, the endless city of Valari Station 9 continued glowing beneath the storm clouds, unaware that something had just gone terribly wrong inside its core systems. Officers began speaking over one another immediately. Security feeds flickered across floating holograms. Static crackled through open communication channels. Power fluctuation detected in Sector 12. Internal transit grid is failing. Docking control just lost 3 civilian platforms. Princess Lasara stepped toward the central command console, her silver ceremonial fabric catching flashes of red light with every pulse of the alarm. "Report clearly," she ordered sharply. "I want facts, not panic." The room quieted slightly. A nervous station technician swallowed hard while scanning streams of corrupted data. "We are detecting unauthorized access attempts inside the station network, Your Highness. Somebody is overriding security permissions from inside the lower maintenance sectors." Sabotage. Possibly. Nathan Hale had not moved from his position near the observation glass. But Lasara noticed his eyes tracking every reflection in the room instead of the people themselves. Doorways, ventilation shafts, blind corners, exit paths. It was not fear. It looked more like instinct. Seal the royal district. One of the Valari guards demanded. We move the princess immediately. Nathan finally spoke. No, the single word cut through the chamber harder than the alarms themselves. Several officers turned toward him instantly. One guard straightened with visible irritation. Human, you do not issue commands here. Nathan ignored the comment completely. His gaze remained fixed on the tactical display rotating above the central table. If this is an internal breach, moving her through the corridors increases exposure points. Locking down the district traps us inside a predictable perimeter. The guard opened his mouth again, but Admiral Vader suddenly interrupted from the rear entrance. Do exactly what he says. Silence followed immediately. The elderly admiral entered the chamber breathing heavily from the rushed walk through security checkpoints. Rain still darkened the shoulders of his military coat. His pale eyes settled briefly on Nathan before shifting toward the tactical display. 3 maintenance sectors have already gone dark, Vader said grimly. And station surveillance lost visual contact with 2 patrol teams 6 minutes ago. Lasara frowned. Lost contact. Their signals disappeared simultaneously. The princess looked toward Nathan again. How did you know we should not move? Nathan remained calm. Because whoever planned this wants controlled movement. Lightning flashed beyond the observation windows again. For half a second the chamber brightened in cold white light. Then darkness swallowed everything. Total power failure. A few startled voices echoed through the room before backup systems activated with a low mechanical hum. Emergency strips along the floor flickered back online, casting thin white lines through the darkness like glowing scars across black metal. The station suddenly felt colder. Smaller. Nathan stepped away from the window at last. How long until external communications recover? Unknown. A technician answered nervously. The station network is fragmenting faster than we can isolate it. Somewhere deep below the chamber floor, a heavy metallic impact echoed through the structure. Not an explosion. Something larger. Slower. The sound rolled upward through the walls like distant thunder beneath the station itself. Several guards instinctively tightened their grip on pulse carbines. Lasara noticed Nathan watching their hands instead of their weapons. You already know what this is, do not you? She asked quietly. Nathan looked at her for a long moment before answering. I know organized fear when I see it. Another impact shook the chamber slightly. Dust drifted from the ceiling vents. Then every screen in the room suddenly went black at once. One by one, lines of white text appeared across every monitor simultaneously. Welcome back, Warlord. The room stopped breathing. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. And for the first time since arriving on the station, Nathan Hale looked genuinely tired. The white text remained frozen across. Every screen in the chamber like a scar burned into metal. Welcome back, Warlord. No symbols. No demands. Just those 2 words repeating endlessly against black displays while crimson emergency lights pulsed overhead. Princess Lasara slowly turned toward Nathan Hale. The human had not changed expression, but something colder settled behind his eyes now. Not fear. Recognition. Around the room, military officers avoided looking directly at him. One young Valari guard near the doorway tightened his grip on his weapon hard enough for his knuckles to pale beneath blue skin. Admiral Vader stepped forward carefully. How did they breach the internal network? He demanded toward the technicians, though everyone understood the real question hiding underneath. Who knew Nathan Hale was here? Static crackled through the ceiling speakers before a distorted station voice responded automatically. Transit routes unavailable. Please remain calm. Then silence returned again. Nathan walked toward the nearest monitor without hurry. His reflection moved faintly across the black glass beneath the glowing white letters. Lasara noticed how still the room became whenever he crossed it. People unconsciously made space for him without realizing they were doing it. Nathan reached the console and rested one hand lightly against the edge. This message was planted before we arrived, he said quietly. No outside infiltration could rewrite this many systems simultaneously without months of preparation. One technician swallowed hard. Then someone inside the station has been waiting for you. Nathan did not answer. He already knew. Lasara studied him carefully beneath the red emergency glow. You recognize the phrase immediately. Yes. Who uses it? For several seconds, only the distant hum of failing station systems filled the chamber. Then Nathan finally looked at her. People who survived old wars. The answer settled heavily across the room. Admiral Vader lowered his eyes first, because unlike the younger officers, he remembered those wars. He remembered entire sectors surrendering after encrypted transmissions carried Nathan Hale's name across military frequencies. Back then, humans had still frightened the galaxy. Not because of their technology, because of what happened when they lost enough people to stop caring about consequences. Another impact rolled through the station structure below them, closer this time. Ceiling lights flickered violently. Somewhere in the distance, civilians screamed briefly before emergency shutters sealed another corridor section. Lasara stepped nearer to the observation glass overlooking the city below. Traffic patterns had collapsed into chaos. Hundreds of ships drifted motionless outside docking sectors while emergency beacons flashed across the skyline like scattered embers in the storm. "Tell me the truth," she said quietly without turning around. "Is this happening because of you?" Nathan's reflection stared back at her from the darkened window. Probably. The honesty stunned her more than denial would have. Slowly, she faced him again. "You say that like you expected it. I hoped I was wrong." "About what?" Nathan hesitated. Tiny lines tightened near his eyes for the first time. "Fatigue. Old fatigue. The kind that settled into people permanently. About them finding me again." The chamber grew silent once more. Then one of the tactical officers suddenly shouted from the rear consoles. "Movement detected in Maintenance, Grid 7. A holographic map flickered alive above the command table. Multiple unidentified signatures moved through the lower station sectors with unnatural precision, bypassing civilian routes entirely. Nathan studied the pattern for less than 2 seconds. "They are hurting us." Admiral Vader looked up sharply. "Toward where?" Nathan pointed toward the central tower district directly beneath the royal chamber. "The reactor spine." Several officers immediately began protesting at once. "That is impossible. The reactor levels are sealed behind military encryption. Nobody can reach the spine without authorization." Nathan's voice remained calm. "Then somebody already has authorization." A terrible realization spread slowly across the room after that. This was never random sabotage. Someone inside Valari Station 9 had opened the doors deliberately, and whoever orchestrated it knew exactly how Nathan Hale thought. The royal chamber no longer felt like a diplomatic station. It felt like a bunker waiting for something terrible to arrive. Crimson emergency lights continued pulsing across the black walls while technicians worked in silence beneath floating holographic screens full of corrupted system data. Outside the observation glass, Valari Station 9 drifted through the storm-dark orbit like a wounded city wrapped in static and lightning. Princess Lasara stood near the tactical table, watching the lower reactor sectors slowly disappear one by one from station control. Entire sections were going blind. And every time another security feed vanished, Nathan Hale somehow already knew which corridor had fallen before the reports arrived. "You have studied this station before," she said quietly. Nathan looked up from the tactical display. "No. Then how do you keep predicting them?" His eyes moved back toward the glowing map. "Because panic follows patterns." The answer sounded simple, but nothing about him felt simple anymore. Admiral Vader rubbed one tired hand across his face while officers argued around him about evacuation routes. "If they reach the reactor spine," one commander warned, "they can disable life support for nearly 40 million civilians." Another impact shuddered through the station beneath their feet. Dust drifted softly from the ceiling panels. Somewhere below them, distant alarms echoed through hollow transit tunnels like mechanical screams. Nathan's attention sharpened instantly again. "That was not an explosion," he said. "It was controlled demolition." Several officers stared at him. "How can you tell?" Nathan pointed toward the tactical grid. "Because the station is still venting pressure evenly. Whoever is down there understands structural load balancing." Lasara felt cold suddenly. Not from fear, from realization. These people knew exactly what they were doing. This was military planning. Precise, patient, deliberate. Nathan stepped closer to the command table and adjusted the holographic map manually. Colored pathways shifted across the projection immediately. "They are not trying to destroy the station," he said. "They are isolating movement corridors." Admiral Vader frowned deeply. For what purpose? Nathan's jaw tightened faintly. To force us into one final location. Silence settled again. Everyone in the chamber understood what that meant. This was not sabotage anymore. It was a hunt. One of the younger Valari officers suddenly looked directly at Nathan for the first time. Who are these people? Nathan remained still for several seconds before answering. Former soldiers. Human. Some. The room seemed to shrink around those words. Lasara studied him carefully beneath the flashing emergency lights. You know them personally. Nathan finally looked at her. I know the kind of men they used to be. Before she could ask another question, every monitor in the chamber flickered violently again. Static burst across the screens. Then a single live video feed appeared. A dark corridor somewhere deep in the reactor district. Flickering overhead lights. Steam drifting through metal walls. And standing in the center of the corridor was an older human male wearing a weathered gray military coat. His hair had turned white long ago, but his posture remained sharp as steel. A faded Earth Coalition insignia rested near his collar. The man looked directly into the camera. Nathan, he said calmly. The entire chamber froze. Nathan did not move. The older man smiled faintly, though sadness lingered behind it. You disappeared without saying goodbye again. Static crackled around the transmission. You should not have come here, Nathan replied quietly. I could say the same to you. The old soldier glanced briefly beyond the camera as distant warning sirens echoed through the corridor behind him. The galaxy keeps pretending the war's ended, he said softly. But men like us do not get endings. We only get quieter. Lasara felt something shift in the room after those words. Not hostility. Grief. Ancient grief carried by people who had survived too much history. The older man returned his eyes to Nathan. They are afraid again. Earth. Valari. All of them. And frightened governments always repeat old mistakes. Nathan's voice remained low and steady. What do you want, Elias? Hearing the name changed everything. Admiral Vader visibly paled. One of the human diplomats near the rear wall whispered under his breath like he had seen a ghost. Because Elias Mercer was not supposed to be alive. The transmission distorted briefly before Elias answered. I want you to stop hiding behind diplomacy and remember what you were built for. Then the screen went black. The chamber remained silent long after the transmission ended. The black monitors reflected only flashing crimson emergency lights now, but the name Elias Mercer still hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Princess Lasara slowly looked around the room. Human diplomats avoided eye contact. Valari officers whispered nervously behind tactical screens. Admiral Vader stood completely still beside the command table, his expression pale beneath the emergency glow. Nathan Hale alone remained calm. Too calm. He stared at the dark monitor for several seconds before reaching forward and shutting the display off entirely. The soft click echoed louder than it should have. Who was that? Lasara asked quietly. Nathan lowered his hand. An old friend. Nobody reacts to an old friend like this. He did not answer immediately. Somewhere far below the chamber, another deep metallic tremor rolled through the station structure. The lights flickered again. Steam hissed through overhead vents. The station sounded sick now. Wounded. Admiral Vader finally exhaled heavily. Elias Mercer commanded the 7th Coalition Fleet during the final years of the border wars. Lasara turned toward him. I have never heard that name. Most official records were erased. The Admiral glanced briefly toward Nathan before continuing. Because the wars nearly destroyed interstellar civilization. The room grew quieter with every word. Mercer and Hale were not simply military commanders, Vader said carefully. They were the men governments sent when diplomacy failed completely. Lasara looked back at Nathan again. And now? Nathan's eyes remained fixed on the tactical map. Now he believes the galaxy is making the same mistakes again. One of the younger officers spoke, nervously from the rear consoles. Sir, reactor access levels are changing. Holographic alerts spread rapidly across the command table. Layer after layer of station security permissions were being rewritten from inside the lower sectors. Civilian transit systems locked automatically. Emergency shutters sealed entire districts. The station was turning itself into a maze. Nathan stepped toward the map immediately. He is dividing the station into controlled territories. Why? Lasara asked. Nathan zoomed the hologram inward toward the reactor spine. Because he wants everyone isolated before negotiations begin. The princess frowned. Negotiations? Nathan finally looked at her directly. Mercer never starts with force if conversation can still work. Then why sabotage the station? Because frightened governments only listen when they feel vulnerable. Before Lasara could answer, the chamber doors suddenly slid open behind them. Several civilians stumbled inside, escorted by exhausted station security officers. Families, maintenance workers, 2 frightened children wrapped in emergency blankets. One little boy clutched a damaged service robot against his chest while alarms echoed through the hallway behind them. The lower corridors are collapsing into lockdown sectors, a security officer reported breathlessly. People are trapped between sealed transit gates. Nathan crossed the room instantly. How many civilians remain near the reactor districts? Thousands. Nathan's jaw tightened slightly. Lasara noticed it immediately. The first visible crack in his calm exterior since arriving on the station. One of the frightened children suddenly looked up from his blanket and froze at the sight of Nathan. The adults nearby grew tense automatically, but the little boy slowly stepped forward instead. "Are you a soldier?" he asked softly. The room went still again. Nathan looked down at the child for a long moment. Then he crouched carefully until they were eye level. "Not anymore." "Good," the boy whispered. "My mom says soldiers always look angry." Something changed in Nathan's face after hearing that. Tiny, almost invisible, but Lasara saw it. Pain. Real pain. Nathan reached out slowly and adjusted the child's blanket around his shoulders before standing again. "Get the civilians to the upper medical decks," he told the officers quietly. "Use maintenance corridors only. Avoid primary transit tunnels." "How do you know which routes are safe?" one guard asked nervously. Nathan looked toward the glowing tactical map again. "Because Elias is leaving exits open on purpose." Lasara felt cold at those words. Not because of the danger, because she was beginning to understand the terrifying part of all this. Nathan Hale could still think exactly like the man hunting him. The station clocks rolled past midnight as Valari Station 9 drifted silently above the storm-covered planet below. Entire sectors had gone dark now. Civilian traffic vanished from the skyline. Only emergency beacons remained blinking across the endless towers like distant stars trapped inside glass. Inside the royal chamber, exhaustion settled over everyone except Nathan Hale. He had not sat down once. Princess Lasara noticed that hours ago, while officers rotated shifts and technicians fought failing systems, the human remained standing near the tactical table watching pathways through the station update in real time. Calm, patient, like he had already accepted how the night would end. The realization unsettled her more than the alarms. Admiral Vader approached quietly, carrying an old black data drive sealed beneath military encryption. His expression looked older now somehow. "You should see this," he told Lasara softly. Nathan looked up immediately. "No," the single word stopped the Admiral for only a second. "She deserves to understand what is happening." Nathan's jaw tightened faintly. Those records were buried for a reason. And now an entire station may die because people buried them. Silence followed. Then Nathan stepped back from the tactical display without another word. Permission through surrender. Vader inserted the drive into the command console. The holographic projector flickered alive above the table. Grainy military footage appeared instantly. Old footage, damaged by time. Entire fleets drifted across a black sky filled with shattered debris fields and burning stations. Coalition warships surrounded a frozen moon somewhere in deep space, while emergency broadcasts screamed through static-filled audio channels. Then Lasara saw him. A much younger Nathan Hale, standing inside a battlefield command center, wearing dark military armor instead of diplomatic black. His hair shorter, his face harder. Around him, exhausted officers waited in absolute silence for instructions. One woman in coalition uniform looked barely old enough to leave the academy. "Civilian evacuation is incomplete," she reported nervously. "Enemy fleets are refusing surrender terms." Young Nathan stared at the tactical display for several seconds before answering quietly. "Then hold fire another 15 minutes. Sir, they are preparing another orbital strike." "I know. We may lose the entire colony." Nathan's expression never changed. "Then we lose ships before we lose families." The footage skipped ahead violently. More static. More ruined starscapes. Entire armadas retreating across broken sectors, while emergency frequencies repeated one phrase over and over again. Hail is advancing. Hail is advancing. Lasara watched another recording. Another battlefield. Another collapsing city. Nathan standing in smoke-filled command rooms refusing direct orders from terrified governments, demanding retaliation. Again and again the same pattern repeated. Delay the strike. Open evacuation lanes. Protect civilians first. The room around her grew very quiet. Because the monster described in military rumors did not exist inside these recordings. What she saw instead was a tired human being forced to carry impossible decisions while entire civilizations screamed for vengeance around him. Then the final classified file opened automatically. Clearance level, Extinction Authority. A single document appeared across the hologram beneath the old Earth Coalition seal. Authorized Commander, Nathan Hale. Final Protocol Access, approved. Purpose, Last Resort Planetary Eradication Authority. Lasara felt cold all over. They gave you permission to destroy worlds. Nathan remained near the observation glass with his back turned toward the chamber. Yes. Did you ever use it? For several seconds, only the low hum of failing station systems answered her. Then Nathan finally spoke. No, Lasara stared at him in disbelief. You could have ended entire wars. That was the problem. Slowly he turned toward her beneath the crimson emergency lights. His blue eyes looked exhausted beyond words now. Once governments realize someone can erase planets, they stop searching for peaceful solutions. Another tremor rolled through the station below them, closer than ever before. Somewhere in the distance, civilians shouted through echoing corridors while emergency shutters sealed another district. Nathan looked toward the dark tactical map again. Elias thinks fear is the only language governments remember. Lasara stepped closer to him carefully. And what do you believe? Nathan's answer came almost too quietly to hear. I believe soldiers should never become the reason children are afraid to sleep. The storm outside finally began to fade near dawn. Thin silver light crept slowly across the endless glass towers of Valari Station 9, while emergency beacons continued blinking through the darkness below. Entire sectors still remained sealed, but the station had stopped shaking. The silence after hours of alarms felt almost unnatural. Inside the royal chamber, exhausted officers slept against walls or slumped beside dead consoles, while technicians restored damaged systems one section at a time. Princess Lasara stood alone near the observation glass, watching maintenance ships drift through the pale morning haze beyond the station shields. Somewhere beneath them, millions of civilians were waking up without knowing how close the station had come to collapse. Behind her, the chamber doors opened quietly. Nathan Hale entered carrying 2 cups of steaming black coffee from one of the surviving emergency kitchens. He offered one toward her without a word. Lasara accepted it slowly. The warmth spread through her cold hands immediately. You have not slept, she said softly. Nathan leaned one shoulder against the dark glass beside her. Neither have you. For a while neither of them spoke. The station lights reflected faintly across the observation windows while repair drones floated silently between distant towers outside. Then Lasara finally asked the question she had been carrying all night. Where is Elias now? Nathan stared toward the horizon beyond the station shields. Gone. You are certain? He never intended to stay. She frowned slightly. Then what was the point of all this? Nathan took a slow breath before answering. To remind governments what fear can become when people stop listening to each other. The princess lowered her eyes toward the coffee warming her hands. And did it work? Nathan looked around the damaged chamber behind them. Officers from different species resting beside one another. Human technicians repairing Valari systems without orders. Civilians sharing blankets across emergency corridors regardless of empire or language. Maybe, he said quietly. The chamber doors opened again. Admiral Vader entered carrying a freshly restored military tablet. He paused briefly after noticing the 2 of them standing together by the glass. Then he approached Nathan slowly. Coalition Command has restored long-range communication. Nathan nodded once. And Earth wants you back immediately. Silence followed those words. Outside the station, sunlight finally broke through the storm clouds below the orbital ring, washing the distant skyline in pale gold. Nathan did not seem surprised, almost as if he had known this moment would come eventually. Veda hesitated before continuing. They are restructuring military oversight after what happened here. Several governments are already demanding emergency summits. Nathan gave a tired smile that never fully reached his eyes. Fear moves politics faster than hope ever does. Admiral Vader looked down briefly before speaking again. For what it is worth, the station is still standing because you were here. Nathan said nothing, because both men understood the truth. The station survived not because Nathan Hale was the galaxy's deadliest warlord. It survived because he spent his entire life trying not to become one again. The Admiral quietly left the chamber after that. Princess Lysara watched Nathan carefully as he stared out across the waking city below them. "Will you return to Earth?" she asked softly. Nathan remained silent for several seconds. "Probably." Something tightened painfully inside her chest at the answer. Strange. She had spent the first days of this journey treating him like a servant she barely noticed. Now the idea of the station feeling empty without him seemed impossible to ignore. Slowly, carefully, Lysara stepped closer. Then, to Nathan's visible surprise, the princess lowered herself into the formal kneeling posture of Valari royal respect, one knee against the polished black floor, silver hair falling softly across her shoulder beneath the morning light. Nathan stared at her in complete shock. "Princess?" "No," she interrupted gently. Her violet eyes lifted toward his. "Come now. Honest. You spent this entire journey pretending to be smaller than you are." The station lights reflected across the old scars near Nathan's hands as he stood motionless before her. Lysara's voice softened almost into a whisper. But the most powerful man in the galaxy was the one who refused to use that power. Outside the observation glass, the storm clouds finally parted completely. And for the first time in many years, Nathan Hale looked less like a weapon and more like a tired human being allowed to rest.